Welcome to part 6 of The Day After Roswell. My name is Klaus, I am the Grousing Gazer, and I'll be your host and narrator for this video. But before we continue, a quick review of part 5. We heard a discussion between Admiral Hillenkoetter, Secretary Forrestal, and President Truman. They spoke about the subjects of keeping UFOs a secret. We also read General Eisenhower's request for General Twining and President Truman's directive to General Twining and General Twining's reply via the air accident report to General Hap Arnold. That concludes a review of Part 5. We start Part 6 with a letter from Vannevar Bush to President Truman on behalf of the Office of Scientific Research and Development, dated July 5, 1947. Bush wants to present his recommendations to President Truman that President Roosevelt put on hold due to World War II. 1. Make known the science contributions made during the Second World War to the military. 2. Ensure future science against foreign technology. 3. Aid research by private organizations. 4. Develop a program to aid future scientific talent and research. What's most interesting is what's in the red box. It is clear from President Roosevelt's letter that in speaking of science, he had in mind the non-terrestrial sciences, including biology and physics, and I have so interpreted his questions. Progress in other fields, such as material fabrication, is likewise important, but the program for non-terrestrial science, in my report, warrants immediate attention. Here's where Majestic 12 comes in. A single mechanism for implementing the recommendations of the several committees is essential. Respectfully yours, Vannevar Bush, Director. The President agrees. Okay, very sincerely yours, Harry Truman. Other than the Office of Scientific Research and Development Laboratories, Bush made reference to other committees. The only two that come to mind are the NTST, Non-Terrestrial Science and Technology, and the IPU, Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit. On September 24, 1947, Dr. Bush got his wish. President Truman authorized Secretary of Defense Forrestal to recommend people for a committee to manage the extraterrestrial situation. As per our recent conversation on this matter, you are hereby authorized to proceed with all due speed and caution upon your undertaking. Hereafter, this matter shall be referred to only as Operation Majestic 12. It continues to be my feeling that any future considerations relative to the ultimate disposition of this matter should rest solely with the Office of the President, following appropriate discussions with yourself, Dr. Bush, and the Director of Central Intelligence. That'll be Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter. Now presenting your 1947 MJ-12 Majestic 12 Committee, brought to you by President Truman. The mandate is facilitation of investigation and recovery of alien spacecraft, and I might add, to also prevent mass hysteria. MJ-1, we met him already in Part 5, Central Intelligence Director Admiral Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter. MJ-2, Joint Research and Development Board Chairman Dr. Vannevar Bush. MJ-3, Secretary of Defense James Forrestal. MJ-4 represents the Army Air Corps Lieutenant General Nathan F. Twining. MJ-5 is former Central Intelligence Group Director General Hoyt Vandenberg. MJ-6 is the National Research Council Chairman Dr. Detlef Bronk. MJ-7 is an aircraft engineer and the National Advisory Committee Director Dr. Jerome Hunsaker. MJ-8 is the National Security Council Director Sidney W. Sawyers. MJ-9 is the Assistant Secretary to the Army Gordon Gray. MJ-10 is a Harvard astronomer and naval intelligence cryptographer, Dr. Donald Menzel. MJ-11 is a joint research and development member, Dr. Lloyd V. Berkner. MJ-12 is a Fort Bliss commandant and a commanding officer of operational control of White Sands, General Robert M. Montague. Let's hear it for your 1947 distinguished MJ-12 Majestic 12 members, reporting only to the President, the seed of the military-industrial complex. The last memo is from the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, dated July 22, 1947. This memo addresses the remaining Truman questions that the air accident didn't address. The extraordinary recovery of fallen airborne objects in the state of New Mexico between 4 July and 6 July. This summary was prepared by Headquarters Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, Scientific and Technical Branch, Counterintelligence Directorate, as requested by Assistant Chief of Staff, G2, at express order of the Chief of Staff. At 13:32 Mountain Standard Time, 3 July 47, radar stations in East Texas and White Sands Proving Ground, New Mexico, tracked two unidentified aircraft until both dropped off radar. Two crash sites have been located close to the White Sands Proving Ground. Site LZ-1 was located at a ranch near Corona, approximately 75 miles northwest of a town of Roswell. Site LZ-2 was located approximately 20 miles southeast of a town of Socorro, with Oscura Peak being the geographic reference point. The area support team personnel were mainly interested in LZ-2 as this site contained the majority of the structural detail of the craft's airframe propulsion and navigation technology. The recovery of 5 bodies in a damaged escape cylinder precluded an investigation at LZ-1. On arrival at LZ-2, personnel assessed the finds as not belonging to any aircraft, rocket, weapons, or balloon tests that are normally conducted from the surrounding bases. First reports indicated that the first crash investigators from Roswell Army Air Force that LZ-1 was the remains of an Army Air Force top-secret mogul balloon project. When scientists from the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory arrived to inspect LZ-2, it became apparent to all concerned that what was crashed in the desert was something out of this world. I'm going to pick up the pace by summarizing each paragraph. Feel free to pause the video if you want to read the actual document. Paragraph 5. IPU interviewed radar operators and officers from the Army Signal Corps of Engineering. They had tracked objects since June 29th. On July the 3rd, 3 objects were tracked. On July the 4th, the objects were picked up again on at least 6 radar stations, plus Alamogordo and Kirtland Army Air Force bases. Paragraph 6 talks of who attended the crash sites: a special radiobiological team, a special engineering detachment, MPs, Dr. Oppenheimer, Dr. Werner von Braun, Dr. Ernst Steinhoff, Dr. Hubertus Straghold, and Randolph Field. Paragraph 7. Not everyone was allowed to the wreckage and bodies. Several bodies went to the Roswell Army Air Force Hospital, Los Alamos, Wright Field, Patterson Army Air Force, and Randolph Field. The power plant went to Alamogordo Army Air Force and Kirtland Army Air Force. Structural debris and assorted parts went to Air Materials Command, Wright Field. Other remains went to the storage facilities of the Naval Research Laboratory. Paragraph 8 confirms A. Twining's meeting with Army Air Force Chief of Staff Spaatz and viewing of the craft's remains. B. Twining's inspection of the craft's remains of the power plant at Kirtland Army Air Force. C. Twining's viewing of the pieces at White Sands Proving Ground. D. Twining's detailed report. Remember the air accident report you saw earlier? E. Eisenhower will view both crafts in late August. F. Truman will be briefed by General Hoyt Vandenberg. The FBI's request for access to the stored craft at Los Alamos was denied. Inquiries to bases involved was restricted. All teletype, telephone, and radio transmissions were monitored for any disclosures of the finds. To maintain secrecy of Site LZ-2, the commanding officer of Roswell Army Air Force was authorized to give a brief press release to local paper in which 8th Air Force headquarters promptly denied rumors that the Army had flying saucers in their possession, which effectively killed press interest. Civilians who might have seen or handled some of the wreckage or viewed bodies were detained under the McNabb Law until all remaining evidence was secured in restricted bases. Witnesses were debriefed by Counterintelligence Corps and warned of consequences of talking to the press. Everyone was placed on a need-to-know access with proper security clearances, though several MPs suffered nervous breakdowns resulting one in committing suicide. Ground personnel from Sandia experienced some form of contamination, resulting in the deaths of 3 technicians. The status of the 4th technician is unknown. Paragraph 11. None of the 5 crew members found survived at LZ-2, so Dr. Detlef Bronk assisted with the autopsy. There were some anatomical differences with the head, eyes, hands, and feet. They have a slight build, about 5 feet tall, with grayish-pink skin color. They have no hair on their bodies, and their clothing were a tight-fitting flight suit that appears to be fireproof. Their overall stature reminds one of young children. Paragraph 12. Dissected animal bodies were found close to LZ-1, and animal parts were found in the craft at LZ-2. Paragraph 13. The investigators think that the Roswell crash was a well-orchestrated hoax by the Russians, or our country has played host to beings from another planet. What do you think? Please leave your comment section. Thank you. What's the grouse? Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, I'd like to conduct this grouse as a debate. The military will put forth an argument, and the civilians will counter it. You, the audience, will get to decide whether or not the retrieval at the Roswell crash was a weather balloon and parachute test dummies or a spacecraft and extraterrestrials. On July 9th, 1947, Brigadier General Ramey calls for a press conference and claims the disk is a weather balloon. Major Marcel was photographed with weather balloon parts, tinfoil paper, tape, rubber, and sticks, and everyone considers the case closed. On June 25th, 1997, the Roswell report was written, stating that parachute dummies were mistaken as aliens, and the weather balloon had Project Mogul equipment attached to the train, such as acoustical sensors and radar-reflecting targets. Colonel Blanchard authorized his own press release the day before. It appears that intelligence officer Major Marcel was able to distinguish the difference between a balloon and a spacecraft.
You couldn't feel that you had anything in your hands. I found one piece of metal, what looked like metal anyway. It was not flexible, but it was as thin as a foil in a pack of cigarettes. It was that thin. One of my boys told me, he said, there's something unusual here. He said, I tried to make a dent in this metal. He said, you can't bend it. You can't make a mark on it. He says, I took a sledgehammer and whammed it. I put it on the ground and whammed it. The sledgehammer bounced off of it. He told me not to say anything. He says, I'll handle it from now on. And that's exactly what he did. When he came out, he said, he told the press that was there, he said, that was nothing but a weather balloon, crashed weather balloon. It was definitely not a weather balloon. And it was an aircraft. So what it could have been, I wouldn't know.
Okay, let's assume it was a crashed weather mogul balloon. Why would the Air Force attach a test dummy to their sensitive equipment? Why would the Air Force release this balloon prior to a thunderstorm? And why would this balloon be flying more than 1,000 miles an hour? Remember in part 1, counterintelligence officer Steve Arnold clocked this thing at moving more than 1,000 miles an hour on his radar.
Dr. Hynek, as a scientist, I think the ball is definitely in your court to prove or disprove the existence of these objects. Dr. Sagan, when asked the question, are UFOs for real, he said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I do not see, my colleagues do not see, and specifically physical evidence to document.
You and your colleagues, and Sagan particularly, have not studied it. Sagan and I were at Harvard together, and we were talking about UFOs. He, of course, poo-pooed it. And I said, well, what do you think about the Homer, New York case? Never heard of it. What do you think of the Monticello, Wisconsin case? Never heard of it. And I went down the line, case after case after case. You'd never heard of him, never studied him. And I said, Carl, darn it, you know as well as I do that for a scientist, he speaks on something, he should be familiar with the literature, he should have studied it. I said, yeah, he says, but I don't have time for that sort of stuff.
So much for Carl Sagan's opinion, but let's examine it anyways. Where is the extraordinary evidence to back up the extraordinary claims? The military cleaned it up and took it away. Remember the 2 flatbeds and the 5 deuce-and-a-half trucks? The journey that 30 crates took going across the country? The EBE body that was examined by the Army Field Hospital? The EBE that was shot by the soldiers while it was fleeing for its life? Now, who is the hostile entity? Remember the autopsy? The only evidence civilians have are eyewitness accounts and logic. Now, what makes sense to you? Please leave your comments in the comment section. And speaking of evidence, under Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Section 798, Disclosure of Classified Information, federal law prohibits the knowing and willful disclosure of classified information. Yes, UFOs and EBEs are deemed classified, secret, top secret, ultra secret, whatever. The penalty is a hefty fine, 10 years in jail, or both. Thank God for FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act requests. This completes the Day After Roswell book review, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed producing it. Stay tuned. The next video is called Disclosures, where officials confess telling lies to us.